a four-part series. ARTisTalk will feature theater and performance artist scholars known both locally and internationally, engaging in a roundtable discussion focusing on their expertise, the current trends in theater, and their careers as artists and scholars. This is ARTisTalk 2021.
Good day, everyone, from all parts of the world for the fourth episode of the ARTisTalk series entitled On Learning and Teaching Design. And I'll be one of the moderators. I am David Esguerra. I am a stage and lighting designer, and I completed my bachelor's degree in stage design at the Korea National University of Arts, or Hanguk Yesul Jonghab-Hakyo, or Hanyejong in short, in Seoul, South Korea. And my experience in working as a lighting designer started in 2017. So far, I've done 3 original Korean musicals, 10 Korean drama plays, one of which is an original play, having its first run at the K-Arts Experimental Theater. The production has toured the Hevichi Festival in Jeju Island, Festival d'Avignon in France, and Cap Excellence and Théâtre at the National Theatre of Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean. So I came back to the Philippines last 2019 and I'm currently taking my Master of Arts degree in Theater Arts at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. So joining me in moderating this episode is one of my classmates in the program, Lorenz, Conanan. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dave. So I'm Lo. I'm a freelance set and costume designer. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Production Design from the De La Salle College of St. Benilde. And since then, I've been working on set and costume design for theater, film, and live events here in the Philippines. And I was also able to take part both as a jury and participant on international theater festivals in Czech Republic and Canada. And just last year, I decided to pursue my MA Theater Arts in theater practice at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. And this year, I just started teaching set and costume design at the De La Salle College of St. Benilde's Theater Arts and Production Design program. Thank you. Now, before we proceed with introducing our esteemed panelists, let's take a recap on why we're doing this ARTisTalk series. Let's watch this video.
So welcome to ARTisTalk 2021. It's a very interesting play with words. Art is talk and ARTisTalk. So it's time to talk about art, theater arts, and the performing arts in particular. With the upcoming 40th anniversary of the Master of Arts Theater Arts Program, or MATA, in August, the Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts has organized a series of activities to celebrate the program's achievements as well as to look into the challenges and the program has encountered and looking forward to future opportunities. I wish to congratulate the organizers of MATA at 40, led by Assistant Professor Brian Viray, the MATA coordinator, together with our MA students, and in partnership with the UP System Office of International Linkages, UP Diliman Office for Initiatives in Culture and the Arts, the College of Arts and Letters, and UP Cineasts Studio. ARTisTalk 2021 will feature theater and performance artist scholars, known both locally and internationally, engaging in a roundtable discussion focusing on their expertise, the current trends in theater, and their careers as artists and/or scholars. The invited speakers include artist scholars from leading international universities and academic institutions like the Juilliard School and Yale University, and will also feature our very own graduates and current students of the program who have established themselves in their respective fields. Artist Talk 2021 will have 4 episodes every Saturday starting May 8th. Make sure to mark your calendars. We all miss going to the theater, but through these talks, we bring the theater to you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
I would like to congratulate the Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts of the University of the Philippines, Diliman for 40 years of Master of Arts in Theater Arts. Mabuhay po kayo! I also want to thank you and commend you for putting all the energy and effort to push this activity forward given the current conditions in the Philippines and the COVID-19 pandemic. I also want to mention here, most especially Professor Brian Viray, for being our very first grantee of our hosting program of the Office of International Linkages under our virtual internationalization platform. I wish you a very productive event. Marami pong salamat.
Welcome to the ARTisTalk Series 2021. This is a project from the Department of Speech, Communication, and Theater Arts. And we are so very proud of the team that organized this. And I would like to give a shout out to Professor Brian Viray, who is the leading figure in this project. The ARTisTalk series is a four-part program that will feature theater and performance artist scholars, where they will be engaging in roundtable discussion. And we are so very proud that we have 21 artist scholars who will be participating in this project. And what is this for? Yes, this is for our MA Theater Arts program 40th anniversary. We are very happy to welcome the art scholars who are participating in this project. Thank you for sharing your ideas, sharing your insights on different topics, on different fields of study. And we also welcome the audience. We hope that our students and other students will join us in this wonderful endeavor. I think you're going to really learn from this ARTisTalk series. I think that not only students in theater or those who love theater, but also other students who might want to take, younger students who might want to take up theater in the future. Okay, so again, welcome to the ARTisTalk 2021. Mabuhay!
Good day to our guest panelists, moderators, and most of all, to our virtual audience members. I welcome you to the 40th year anniversary of the MA Theater Arts program. The institution of the Master of Arts in Theater Arts program was an idea initiated by Professor Emeritus Antonio Mabesa 40 years ago, according to Professor Amiel Leonardia. A graduate program would be the natural offshoot of the certificate and BA programs which were being offered during that time. Professor Mabesa, Professor Leonardia, and Mr. Chris Vertido agreed on the plans to propose a graduate program in theater arts. This decision was guided by their vision for a Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts to be the leading department in theater art studies in the Philippines. We are very fortunate that their vision has persisted for 40 years now. This is a powerful proof of the significant part of theater education, not only in UP, but to the Philippine society in general. ARTisTalk 2021 and MATA Gathering are two of the main exciting activities from May to August this year, which the DSCTA will convene and host in an effort to share with its current students, faculty, alumni, and its potential students the milestones and challenges of the last 40 years of the MATA program while looking forward to future opportunities. We express our utmost gratitude to Professor Mabesa, Professor Leonardia, and Mr. Vertido as proponents and initiators of the MA Theater Arts program for their bold vision and undeterred courage. We also thank the past and current theater graduate faculty members who have dedicated their services to the department and assured the continuance of the MATA program. Finally, we thank our alumni and current students, our primary stakeholder. Your commitment to the discipline of theater and performance studies guarantees the next 40 years of our program. Muli, maraming salamat po.
We are very excited today to do the last episode as we are joined by our panelists who are not just extremely talented and known in their fields of expertise. They're also raising the Philippine flag both here and abroad through their remarkable works in the theater. So, our first panelist is a theater consultant, lighting designer, and technical theater practitioner in the Philippines, a graduate of BA in Broadcast Communication from the University of the Philippines, Visayas. She has worked as production stage manager, technical director, and lighting designer for various arts programs of the Cultural Center of the Philippines, Philippine Educational Theater Association or PETA, the Japan Foundation Manila, and the University of the Philippines. She has also created and designed technical theater syllabi for the Cultural Center of the Philippines, arts education programs, and in private and public institutions in Manila and the regions. She was the recipient of the Fukuoka International Cultural Exchange Program between Japanese and Filipino stage designers and technicians in 2008. She was also a recipient of the Asian Cultural Council grants, the ACC New York Fellowship in 2002 to undertake an internship program at the American Dance Festival in Duke University and the Dance Theater Workshop in New York City, and in 2009, the ACC Philippines Fellowship for a mentorship program with renowned American lighting designer Jennifer Tipton. With the support of the Andre Pierre Salim Fellowship, she received her MFA in Technical Design and Production at the Yale University School of Drama in 2013. At present, she is an extension specialist at the UP Theater Complex and serves as a theater consultant for UP Diliman Theaters, Ayala Performing Art Theaters, and the Cultural Center of the Philippines. She is also my teacher, professorial lecturer in the MATA program. Everyone, let's welcome Ms. Barbara Tan-Tiongco. Hi, ma'am.
Our second panelist is an assistant professor of costume design at the Central Connecticut State University. He obtained his undergraduate degree in production design at the De La Salle College of St. Benilde School of Design and Arts in 2007. And since then, he designed shows for various theater companies in the Philippines, and he left the country in 2014 to pursue his MFA in costume design at University of Connecticut. His body of work includes international premieres of Waitress, Kinky Boots, Matilda, and beautiful Carole King musical, Manila, Philippines, The Producers, La Cage aux Folles, Alice in Wonderland, Jekyll and Hyde, Wizard of Oz, Pride and Prejudice, King Lear, A Midsummer Night's Dream, To Kill a Mockingbird, On Golden Pond, Steel Magnolias, to name a few. He is also a recipient of the Syracuse Area Live Theater Award Best Costume Design for musical La Cage aux Folles. I am also honored to work as his associate costume designer for several productions he did in Manila. Let's give it up for Mr. Raven Ong.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Our third panelist is a designer, educator, activist, and producer. He is the recipient of a Tony Award for Best Costume Design of a Play. And take note, he is the first person of color to win in his category and has also been nominated twice for his designs for Once on This Island and Torch Song. He has designed sets and costumes for over 200 theater, opera, and dance productions. Film credits include production design for Lingua Franca by Isabel Sandoval for Netflix and his costume design for Respect, the Aretha Franklin biopic starring Jennifer Hudson for MGM will be on the big screen in winter 2021. He is the producing creative director for Encores at New York City Center, a professor of design and head of design and production at Fordham University, and he serves on the American Theater Wing's Advisory Committee. His lifelong advocacy is for an equitable landscape in theater and film for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and for the rights of immigrants. Everyone, Mr. Clint Ramos.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
All right. First off, let me emphasize again how extremely overwhelmed I am to be surrounded by these panelists. Salute to you, Ma'am Barbie, Sir Raven, and Sir Clint. So now for the roundtable discussion. Since this episode focuses on learning and teaching theater design, we will ask questions about your experiences, both as a student and educator. And along the discussion, we'll also ask about your professional experiences and creative process. All right. So for the first question, just to give our audiences, a brief background on how you started in the theater. So when did your interest in theater design begin, and how did it develop into a decision to take further studies on it? So let's begin with Ma'am Barbie.
I started out as supposedly a performer on stage. Not that I did not look good on stage or did not perform well, but because, when you're in the province, you lack so many resources. So you have to be creative. You have to be everything. And then I realized that because I was also in broadcast comm, that I love doing technicals. So one of my assignments would always be to be in charge of lighting or sometimes in charge of the sound system for our performances in school for the Teatro Amakan. And then eventually I moved on to the cultural center upon the invitation of Monino Duque. And little did I know that I will be dealing with lighting design or even stage design for that matter. It never occurred to me how far the difference is between being in school in the province and then going to Manila and work at the cultural center. I have seen shows coming to the provinces through their outreach program, and that's where I guess my interest started to really work on design, but there was really no, let's say, production or anything that really triggered me to say that yes, I want to be in lighting design. It actually just happened because it started with a need when I was with Ballet Philippines, working as a production manager. And then when you go on tour, you be the production manager, you be the stage manager, you be the technical director, and then the lighting designer, because we could not bring in the lighting designer if there's no budget. So the priority would always be the dancers. So you have to be everything. And that's where it all started. I realized that there's so many things that I need to learn and to be able to produce the designs of the designer when they leave me their paper and say that this is what you need to do. And then you go there in a venue when you travel, and then you see, oh, I haven't seen this lighting instrument back home, so I have to learn this. But luckily enough, that's where you have people, crew in other countries and in other venues as well that were very, very helpful. And they would teach you, like, this is how you're going to manipulate it. This is how it is going to happen. If you do this is what's going to happen. So that's where I learned. And then I realized that, oops, there's a need for me to learn so many things. Yep. And experience will not just teach me, but rather, it's best that you always probably go somewhere, study, or really immerse myself. So that's where it all started.
Oh, that's inspiring, Ma'am. I didn't know you were once a performer.
Oh, long forgotten.
All right. So how about Sir Raven?
Hi. Yeah, when I graduated high school, I had two options. It's either to take fine arts and advertising at a different university or production design. But at first, I went for fine arts and advertising. And on my second year, I kept telling myself, I think that something was missing. And so what I did was I transferred to Benilde. And when theater design was introduced to me right there and then, I figured that was the missing piece. And so it really sparked when we were introduced to period styles and period costuming when we were staging The Importance of Being Earnest. I wasn't really clearly sure at first that such time periods existed. And so that was like the beginning of it. And so, and at Benilde, we were trained to design sets and props and costumes, and not just like designing but making them. And so it just like became such a wonderland for me, and that's really how and when it started. And after graduating college, I apprenticed with Eric Pineda, and for many years actually. And then that's when I decided to pursue further studies in costume design. So that's my short story of my background.
Thank you, Sir Raven. How
Thank
about
you.
Sir Clint?
It's a very long story, but when I was very, very young, then the First Lady Imelda Marcos had been testing children all over the country to bring them to various schools. I'm from Cebu originally, and they tested a bunch of kids, and they would get like the 5 top kids or whatever. And so I was placed at this school called Philippine Science, and I was young. I was 12, and there I met a drama teacher, and his name is Chris Miliado. And he showed me what theater could be and what theater was. He was doing a lot of protests against the Marcoses during that time, and I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the theater, and so I sort of rerouted my way out of the sciences into the arts, and then I went to UP, and then I met the person who would, I think, kind of change the trajectory of my my life really, and that was Tony Mabesa. I'd been a director when I was at UP, but within our class, which was I was in school with Paul Morales and Aurea Solito. There weren't really any designers, you know, and so I just took it upon myself to actually do the designs for the shows for both Paul and Aurea's. We were kind of inseparable then. Then I came to America, you know, because I wanted to practice kind of in-depth level, and I was kind of like looking for, you know, my voice. And then I came to I went to grad school at New York University. I don't know. I think I just fell into design. You know, I wasn't quite. I don't think I was able to really maximize the communication potential I had with actors, and so I didn't think I would be as effective as a director as I would be if I were a designer. I think one of the things that I love about being a designer is it's not always public. You know, there are times that I actually go back to my studio and be insular and it's just about me and the work, you know, and then there are times that you go public. So I like that quality, and so sort of that kind of you know, that's sort of my trajectory in terms of design, really.
Thank you, Sir Clint. So what I've noticed about the answers of our panelists is there's one thing in common, no? Like when you experience doing theater firsthand, you really, you know, fall in love with it, and you know, there's this hunger for knowledge, like to know more and to hone your skills, and that's really how you decide to do further studies on it. So let's move to our next question, Jaylo.
All right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so for our next question, what are the glaring differences between studying and teaching theater design here and abroad? And what are the challenges you've experienced?
But, you know, I've not been in the Philippines for a long time now. So, you know, I come home for Christmas and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really, I'm not quite in touch with the way design is being taught now in the Philippines. So when I was going to school, I was learning under one teacher, and that was Oji Juliano. And he was pretty much trained in sort of the American model, you know. Amiel Leonardia was also teaching, and he too was trained under the American model. And Amiel, I think, got his MFA from the University of Hawaii. I have to tell you that I think my journey in sort of teaching design has kind of gone kind of full circle. You know, when I came here to America, I was very porous. I was ready to absorb everything. You know, I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn how everything, costume history, techniques, and all of that. But I found when I left grad school, and then maybe 5 years after, I found that whatever I learned in school here, in design school here, didn't quite sit with me spiritually, and I think that sort of a large part of that was because I was slowly realizing that I was actually learning the craft through colonized eyes, you know. So from then on, my process has been about unlearning what I learned, right? And when I say that, I'm not saying that I'm actually discarding them or getting rid of them, right? I'm actually now separating what I had learned and the aesthetics that that I had learned here, and why that was being valued as the sort of the prime aesthetic, as the aesthetic that was to be desired, and somehow I felt while I was learning that I was denying my own heritage, my own ancestral lineage, my own Filipino-ness. I think, you know, like any other culture that's non-Western, a lot of what we hold are multiplicities, right? And I think and that explains our sort of complex way we layer things, you know, particularly in design, not only in the theater but like in Philippine design, or in the way we look at the arts, right? Like there's no denial of the layers both of colonialism but also the layers of culture that comes with us. And I while I was going to school in America, I slowly started to forget that, right? And so one of the things, like an example of this was when I was going to school, everything was about paring everything down, right? And so you would design a set or a piece of scenery for, like, let's just say a Chekhov, right? And everything, all my teachers, particularly my white male teachers, would say, just strip it down, strip it down, strip it down, strip it down. All you need is a tree and a chair and all of that kind of stuff. And while I found that really fascinating, a voice behind me kept on saying, I don't understand why you're wanting me to do that, right? Like, why is that? And there was almost this immediate and automatic acquiescence to minimalism and to essentialism, right? Like boiling everything down to one essence. While I don't think that that's wrong, I also don't think that it's the only answer, right? And so I think part of that I slowly started to deconstruct. As I was working, and a lot of it is because I eventually realized that why that didn't sit well with me, and that was because I was denying the complexities of who I am as a human being, the complexities of culture, the complexities of humanity and the human condition. And to me, it seemed like I was underestimating how an audience could comprehend a design, right? Like, why can't I layer many things, you know? Why can't I have 100 trees? Why does it have to be just one? Why can't I have, like, you know, an 18th century chair with like another day, and so to me it became about questioning the sort of aesthetic and where all of that is rooted, right? And that for me became sort of my ethos for teaching. Like, I wanted to teach students who would approach design from a very decolonized point of view, right? Or particularly theater design, right? From not only a storytelling point of view, but from a cultural point of view, where you're looking at things, at symbols, and actually trying to deploy the symbols through a cultural lens rather than an aesthetic lens, or rather than a prescribed lens. This is a long-winded answer for your question, but that's kind of like where everything lies for me in terms of like how I actually teach design. I don't know how to teach design. I really don't. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means to teach design. How do you teach art? Right? And for me, it can only be reflective. It can only be how I practice art. And that is a practice. It's a practice. It's like a meditation practice. It's like a spiritual practice. It's like going to church every day. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know how to teach something unless it's rooted in the way I practice art, you know? So yeah.
Thank you so much, Sir Clint. Okay, now, Ma'am Barbie.
Yeah, yeah, yep, Clint, it's really wonderful, which is because you've been gone for so long. What is true in what you said was that if you strip off Chekhov in the Philippines, it will work because your budget is only this. So it will work when you only have a tree and a chair. But it's yeah. Your Clint is correct that you cannot really teach design. I think what from my experience is that you can only teach them the tools, how to use the tools properly. And these tools there's so many of them. Here in the Philippines, you cannot show them everything, all the tools, because we don't even possess them, right? I mean, even if you show them in your books, you give them a lot of readings, a lot of illustrations, photos, and still it's just more of appreciation, right? So you have to pattern your learning or your teaching into whatever is available and let them know, your students know that it should not limit you. These things, these tools, they should not limit you. In fact, they should make you work some more, make open them up and then use them for another things or make them useful for other things. Unlike when you are what is true is that yes, our training of stage design in general is really from the West, right? We can't deny it. It's really from the West. Even our theater history, it's all from the West. And whenever I teach, I would always say, sorry for those who are so Filipino, so pro-Filipino. It is unfortunate, but it is what it is. We're really basing it from the West. And our gauge is always from the West, like, oh, this is how they did it and this is what we want to do it. Like, unless you do a very good adaptation, then as what Clint was saying, yes, culturally you can do it. If you really have a good adaptation and you really translate it into Filipino, then that would really really be a good material. So I do agree that you really cannot teach lighting design, and these are just the tools. Your professors will just listen to you. Even abroad, they will just listen to you and say that, okay, if that's how you understood things. I guess it's more of the method of how you use these tools that for me is very important, and to be able to show your students, to share with them that this one looks better, this one does not look good, but nothing is right or wrong. It's not that. So I think that is difficult. I mean, art per se is such that there's no right or wrong. It depends on the person's expression. So yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. And lastly, Sir Raven.
Yeah, I think to add to what Clint and Barbie said, I think we also have to realize that it's a changing world, and it's a fast-changing world right now, and all of the issues are very different compared to the issues from 10 years, 20 years ago. And I think that at this point, designers really are responding to what designs are, what they mean. Personally, as a designer, and how designers find their voice and meaning and truth in their designs as well. So in so many ways, spectacles really are not the spectacle anymore the way we define them. Spectacles really are more about finding meaning and truth in your design, and I think that that's really what makes the world of design really such an amazing art form during our time nowadays. And I mean, I also haven't done a lot of teaching in the Philippines. The most that I've done really are the master classes whenever I get invited. But what I really gather and sense is this warmth and extreme enthusiasm from the students, whenever I come. And that's also one part that I really enjoy the most, the welcome, and how much you embrace the things that we share with you, and that to me is very fulfilling and rewarding. To add to the question that you have as a response, yeah, although we really acknowledge that there's not a lot of schools in the Philippines that offer theater design, but when you go to those that offer design courses and theater courses, they are excellent. These schools are really excellent. So I think as a start, we should really appreciate where we are and what we do and what our professors are giving us and your professors giving you, because they're excellent at what they're doing, since these are the only schools that offer these courses. And then pursuing or even studying abroad, at least for me personally, it's more of a step up to what I've already learned in the Philippines. And just to add to my short story, a short version of my long story earlier, was that I did not just decide to come here. It has to be the perfect timing as well. Yeah, and you'll know if the universe is actually talking to you and responding to you. Yeah, it wasn't really very easy for me when I came here, because part of your question really is to talk about challenges, right? And I came here in the winter. So that was my first challenge, from the Philippines straight to winter in Connecticut. And so that was, my memory of coming here as part of the challenge. And really the challenge also is realizing that depending on which school you go and which school you pick when you study abroad. For instance, I knew that I will be a graduate assistant, and a graduate assistant that entails working in the costume shop while studying. So that's a whole different thing, the whole different kind of life, because I didn't have to do that in college there in the Philippines. So that to me was another challenge. And part of the challenge as well is like basically leaving the Philippines. Like, am I really ready for this? Leaving your comfort zone and all of the things that you have to prepare to get into another country and all of that. You will know that once it's the right timing. And really the advice here is, if you don't feel like it's the right time, then don't really force things to happen, and it will come if it's for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Raven.
Okay. Just before you proceed to your next question, JLo, like what Sir Raven mentioned. Actually, I see a lot of synchronicity in terms of our experiences. Just a quick sharing. When I also left the Philippines to study abroad, 2014, it was December 1st, and it's the first snowfall in South Korea, and I was really I wasn't prepared, so I can relate to the challenge. And I loved what Sir Clint said about the colonized point of view in terms of approaching design and teaching, because it also reminded me of the time when in a scenography class, my professor instructed us to do a Chekhov play as well. It was the seagull, and I presented my idea and I was so proud of it. And then to my surprise, the professor just scrapped it and said, this is wrong. And that's the time where I can relate to what Sir Clint mentioned, na parang I was trying to realize what went wrong. And then yung finding your roots, and like the fact that your creative output is just it's a product of everything and your cultural roots. So it's really wonderful. All right, so JLo, for the next
All right.
question.
Thank you. So, yeah, for our next question, and since the three of you are teaching theater design, and me as a former student and now lecturer in theater design program, I know that there are two important aspects in teaching design. So, first is the technical aspect, and the other is the artistic aspect. So, we can say that an eye for good design is as important as the technical skills like carpentry, woodwork, metalwork, operating a lighting console, pattern making, or scenic painting, and many more. Now, in teaching students who have zero knowledge in theater design, which one do you think should come first, and which one do you think should educators put more emphasis on? Okay, so for this time, Sir Raven can start.
So this is really such an amazing question, because the nature of what we do in theater, especially if you're in the design field, is that it's highly technical. We're always, whenever you're given a project, you think about production timeline and when the deadlines are, what do I have to accomplish, and where do I go for my mananahis, and and all of that stuff. Like, when do I even go to the Visoria to source fabrics and stuff? So it's really very highly technical. And the way we actually do things in the Philippines isn't necessarily very different from how we do things here, in terms of, all the errands that we run and all of the resources that we have to find and all of that. But to me, and this is what I also tell my students a lot as well, I always make sure to bring them back to emotional response. I always make sure to bring them back to what do you call this? The getting lost to and falling in love with the material. Because sometimes when we read a script, for instance, you're given a project, what we do is highlight all of the technicalities and all of the requirements of the script says that we need to give this character a red dress or something. So we're too keen and we're too excited, and we're quick to jump, to all of the technicalities in the script. But sometimes we have to remember, we have to always go back and just fall in love and get lost in the text, because that's how you find meaning, in your design. And when dealing with students, there are students, and you will know that, because it's student teacher kind of like relationship as well. When you teach, you will know if a certain student excels more in the emotional aspect or the artistic skill side of it versus the technical side of it. But to me, I think it has to go side by side. I think it has to be sabay. When you mentor your students, for as long as both areas are well balanced, I would say, because we all know the requirements, or what being a costume designer or a scenic designer means, or the lighting designer or an artistic person, in the theater means. You have to be skilled at what you do, but you also need to be a very good designer in a way that you're very good with visuals and how you represent things. So yeah, I do acknowledge that a lot of the times in what we do, we really are more focused and centered into producing and the building part and the construction part of the costumes or the sets and the lights. But that's what I always try to do with my students. And just like very recently, we just did this painting with music kind of exercise in class, where sometimes you just like have to feel it before you actually design something. It has to ring true to you first, and even through when questions like when was the last time did we actually enjoy nature, when was the last time did you actually had a whole box of pizza to yourself, things like that, because sometimes we tend to, self-care also again is very important, and as a designer you also have to be healthy. As a designer you also have to be, in order for you to just excel at what you do, you also have to be physically and mentally, emotionally ready before you jump into your productions, and then it's more of like about ourselves too and how we take care of ourselves. So that's how I do it when I teach my students. I make sure that nothing really is ahead. If I think that we've been doing so many technical things like scale model building and all of that stuff, I make sure to pull them back and, hey, let's just take some time during this class to just enjoy music. Let's just paint, free flow, no requirements, no certain guidelines. Just I want to see who you are, your other side, of being an artist. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. How about Mom Barbie?
Yeah, the first thing that I always ask my students would be, what do you know about this? How do you define, let's say, when you talk about lighting design, how do you define lighting design? And that for me is a way to understand where they're coming from and to know what they know, what they don't know, right? So that's where I should start. And then I always believe that your foundation is very important. If your foundation is not that strong, then you will not be able to create something that you really want to create. You will not be able to produce something that you really want to show people. So history for me is very important. How did this thing happen? Where did this come from? Who invented this? Who started this? And that is very important, because if I were to do something on stage and then say that, oh, somebody will ask me, how did you come up with this? And I will just say, I don't know, I just saw it, something like that. And that would be embarrassing because I maybe something that I have seen in the movies or in other plays or, in other shows. And then I just want to do it here in this particular play that I'm doing. And I don't know where it came from. And I don't even understand why that person, where I somehow got inspiration from, or that material where I got inspiration from, I don't even know how it happened to be. So I really have to understand that. And that for me is very important. The history, the background. And once you know that, I think you can just do anything that would allow your creative mind to explore many things. Yeah. So for me, history is very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you. And lastly, Sir Clint.
Yeah, that's actually a difficult question for me. Yeah, because I don't really know. I don't know if there's a formula, right? And I don't know if there's a right way. As Barbie said, I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think part of where I am right now is that I actually looking at the way we work in the theater or even in the entertainment business, and in sort of like looking for equality and the equity of voices, I one of the things that I keep on thinking about is the way I was trained, right? And starting from UP, where Audrey, for instance, was designing and directing at the same time, or Amiel was directing and designing at the same time. So there never really was a hierarchy on how and on who or the role of the designer was never placed in a hierarchy that was below anybody else, right? And so part of where I am right now is that a lot of what I teach my students is critical and analytical thinking, and I say this because I think I don't know, it's a chicken or the egg thing, right? Like, do they start like learning the techniques, like how to draft and how to model make, or like, or if you're doing costumes, like how draping and all of that. I don't know to me, that's a personal thing, right? Like you teach them, as Barbie said, you teach them the tools, if they're anything like me, they wouldn't. Like I'm not really good technically. I'm not. Don't ask me to build anything for you because you will be very, very sad. But what I put value on is the critical thinking. I put value on sort of the way they look at the big idea, right? And I think part of maybe is not being thought of. I would just say that maybe part of the way design is taught, particularly in the United States, is that it is so siloed. It is so it is relegated as a craft, right? And I think it limits its potential, right? So for me, a theater designer, when you are being hired, I'll speak for myself. When I'm being hired to design a play or a musical or anything, an opera, I'm carrying with me my whole self, right? And part of that self is that I'm gonna go in there, and part of my job is to actually to contribute to the vision of that production. And the design itself not only is an aid to the storytelling or whatever that story is, but it can actually potentially, if I deploy it right, if I play my cards right, it actually is a vessel for a larger message. It could be a political statement. The whole design could be a catalyst for thought, right? And so when most of the time when I look at, for instance, when I design the last set I designed on Broadway, and in every sort of like set I actually designed, I think about what are the opportunities do I have, aside from the play itself, the play proper, once the play happens, what are other opportunities what are those? What are those opportunities do I have that's independent of the play, where I can actually deploy some politics, where I can actually tell another story, or where I can tell them about the human condition, right? And so that means, can I mess around with the audience perceives itself? You know, can I actually play with that? You know, when a character comes in, and do I create discomfort by how that character appears, right? Because an audience would expect a character to be this way and this way, but then may I present something dissonant to your perception. I'm interested in theater that actually is assaultive, that a theater that challenges you. And so my aesthetic, my design, and the way I teach design has to encompass that kind of thinking, right? When you ask me what comes first, technical or artistic, I think even before that, what comes is thinking. What comes is like really critical, analytical thinking. Why are you there? Why did you choose to become a designer? Not only a designer, but a designer for the theater, right? Because a very particular kind of job where you actually don't get to just be yourself. You're working with other people, but also your work is literally only alive if somebody watches it. And it's only alive within that time frame, right? Within that time frame of when the audience is in. And I'm very intrigued by that relationship, because like, I think part of why I've been designing this long is I get excited about the possibilities of these ideas, right? Because it's so easy, you know, when you design so many shows, I think it becomes so rote. It becomes so like, oh, here's another job. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna break down the script. I'm gonna, you know, all of this kind of stuff. Like, for me, I challenge everybody who's learning theater design to actually think of yourselves not only as designers, not only as, you know, as technicians, but actually as analytical thinkers and as leaders, as cultural leaders. You're actually literally, you're creating culture. You literally are creating culture. You know, a lot of the things that I have in me, in my mind, in my spirit, has been through the designs that I've seen on stage and in film, and in, you know, in the designs that have been used and deployed in storytelling, right? And those are the things that stick in my mind. Those create sort of my aesthetic ethos. And so I that is a huge responsibility. So when you think of yourself as a designer, oh, I'm only a designer, or I'm this, actually, you know, no, you have a huge opportunity to make a dent, to make a cultural dent. You know, your work could actually be a cultural marker. You know what I mean? I mean, you look at Badong, right? Like the way his designs kind of like live independently of the plays or the productions, right? It literally is like, wow, you're watching it and you're watching something really important. You know, even before the play begins, you're watching the set and you're like, oh, right, there's something here. There's so much thought and tension. And that's what the theater is, right? It's not only to entertain you, it's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to be a venue for thought, you know? I have very long answers to questions. I apologize.
No, because it's critical thinking. So.
Exactly. Interesting answers. Now, this is something we'd really love to hear your thoughts on. I'm sure there are a lot of young designers out there watching us right now. Given your years of experience as designers, how do you define a good stage or set design, a good lighting design, and a good costume design?
Can we change the question? Because I said there's no such thing as good or bad. No, no. It's all right. It's all right. When I said that there's no such thing as good or bad, as what Clint and Raven have expressed, is that it's really more of aesthetics. It's more of your thought patterns. What you are as a person is, of course, they come out you know, in your works. You cannot deny it that I am this and then my work is different. No, it follows. When I say that there's no bad design, because it's in your aesthetics. It's in, as they call it, it's very relative. So, or beauty is in the eye of the beholder, cliche as it may be, but it's very applicable. But for me, the very good design is that whether you are praised or not. But for me, by your work, or what your audience have seen in your work, for me, a very good lighting design is that as a designer, you know that you have done your homework. You knew that you have done the paperwork that needs to be done. You have done your research. You have collaborated very well. You did not fight everyone. You did not, walk out of the rehearsals or any deliberations. And you have influenced people. So, and the last thing that Clint said was very important, because that is important for me too. How you're going to influence, because that speaks of you. So if I say that if I see a play and I don't like how it was lit, I would just say, okay, then maybe that's how the designer thinks of it. But then you would say, what is its impact on you? And then you would hear stories that, there's nothing that you will learn from this design, because there's nothing in it. It's like simple as the designer will just say, okay, just make me a sketch and then just build it and then construct it and then show it. And I don't like it, so scrap it. I think that the very good design is really a process that is long, tedious, and it's not always easy. It's not always easy to design. And you would see it as an audience, you would see that this design was conceived in a very thoughtful manner. You would see it. You would see when a design is just a copycat. You would see when a design is just done without research. You would easily see it. So that for me is a good design. The bad design is that when there's really no meaning in it, I think that's what it is. But that's, again, as I've said, it's very relative.
Exactly. I love what you mentioned, ma'am, that a design that's undergone a thorough process, a lot of critical thinking, research, and most importantly, not fighting with the production staff. Not causing
the collaborative process is very important.
It is.
Clint mentioned about the vision. The vision of the director is very important. And then when he mentioned that because the designer is also the director, so there is no, correct, Clint, as far as I've understood you, is that there is no, you cannot define what the set designer is or who is on top of who, right? Who makes the decision, because he is just one and the same person. But in the end, it's always the vision. You work for the vision of the production.
Gosh, I was listening intently to Barbie. I can't remember what the question was. What was the what defines good design?
You need a glass of red wine. You can.
It's the evening time.
You need red wine.
Kasi po, alas 11 na po ng gabi dito. What was I gonna say? So yes, that's a really it's a very dangerous question. I think because I think we start to adjudicate what good art and what bad art is, right? And so and I try not to do that, right? Because I actually get really upset when critics when critics really attack your work because they want it to be something else. They want it to be something that it isn't, right? And I feel like their job is actually to criticize what's in front of them, not actually criticize it for what it isn't, right? And so I think those are the two very distinct things. You know what I mean? Like, I'm actually presenting you with something, deal with it, like criticize what's in front of you. Don't talk about something that it isn't, right? And so, I always think of theater and everything, whether it's a musical, whether whatever we do, it's always about context, right? It's always about it's a relationship between a container and the contained, right? So if you can imagine a box and whatever's inside that box, that is the primary theatrical relationship, right? So you could imagine any sort of interaction that involves a container and a contained to be a theatrical interaction, right? So a human being goes inside an elevator, and that to me is already theater, right? Like a person is literally interacting with an environment, right? Like there's that. So for me, what makes a good design is something that acknowledges the relationship of that context. Something that actually says, oh, right, I understand this whole thing is helping me understand the human condition. Because when I say context, and when I say that box could be a room, it could be society, it could be, a family, it could be whatever it is, right? But and that relationship is like, is what is being contained, is that bumping violently against what it's containing, what's containing it, or is it like, does it acquiesce? Does it feel like it belongs in there? It's always that, like any sort of play, any whatever is that. For me, a design is what magnifies that relationship. A good design is actually a successful, I'm not gonna say good, a successful design actually magnifies that relationship. That's number one. Number two is that we all have different versions of what is right and what is wrong, what is good or what is bad, all of that kind of stuff. But there's only one truth. Right. There's only one truth that we all know. We all know, truth and justice to be one thing. Like we say, this particular truth is absolute. Like, that's just true. For me, a good design also magnifies the truth. Right. A successful design magnifies the truth. And when it is very successful is when it's magnifies the most amount of truth, right? And so I say this, and this seems so abstract, but because when you look at theater design, it doesn't live independently of the event itself, right? It's not like a painting or some static sculpture or even an installation, right? It is one, and it is the event, and it provides it is one and the same. Your design and the event itself is one and the same, right? Like that's the thing. That's the nest itself. And so for me, when you think about theater design, when you think about, oh, what is a good costume? What is a good set? Is it like, oh, it's period perfect? It's the most kind of like, oh, it got the period correctly. Does that make it good? I mean, does that make it successful, right? Yes, it's perfect. Like it's replicated it perfectly. But did it sit right? Did it actually magnify the truth, right? Like, or, would something that's actually imperfect be more truthful to what the whole thing is trying to say? So I say this because I think a lot of us are addicted to beauty and perfection and all of this kind of stuff, and making sure that everything sits in there. And we forget that what we're actually trying to do is not that. What we're trying to do is magnify the human condition, the truth of the human condition. And so I urge you to think about design in that way, right? So elements of design don't necessarily need to be just color, volume, elements of design are vast. Fear is an element of design. Time is an element of design. What does it mean when you withhold an effect? What does it mean when you actually perfectly time the arrival of something? Right? And so to me, I think about intangible things as design elements, as something you as a designer can actually deploy, rather than the traditional things like color, light, dark, texture, all that kind of stuff. There's so much more at your disposal than those things,
Exactly. I love what you mentioned about a design that magnifies the truth. And I guess, yeah, that's we should aim as designers when we design for the theater. And I guess Sir Clint found the right term. It's instead of saying good design, it should be a successful design. So, Sir Raven, what do you think? How do you define a successful design in the theater?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with both Clint and Barbie with what they said. There really isn't no such thing. There's no such thing as bad and good. There's successful design, and what comes with that success really is if your design, meets or fulfills the purpose of that design. Really is the bottom line of this. And if I may add to what Clint said regarding magnifying the truth, and if that truth gets magnified in your audience members, and it becomes a moment of realization for your audience members, then that's when it becomes really successful. So if it's something that resonates with your audience members and it becomes a moment of realization, then that's the magical element right there happening to your viewers. And if I may just share an experience watching a production in the past where there's Act 1 and Act 2, and in Act 1 of the show, the set was just very stationary. The set wasn't moving. It was just a box set. It was very stagnant. There's no life in it. And then in Act 2, suddenly some of the set pieces started moving. But because that element right there becomes part of the storytelling, which resonated and made me realize that, the moving set pieces actually goes with the movement of this character's life and what the character is going through with this particular journey. And so because of that truth being magnified, then that becomes a moment of realization for me as an audience, and that's the best feeling ever. You get out of the theater space bringing something with you, that truth that we keep saying about, and that's lived performance, that's lived experience, really, in the theater. And you actually might not be hearing, the answers that you might be expecting before this session, but that really is what design is all about. It has a lot. There's so many critical thinking. There's so many analyzations. There's so many, it's just like all about life. Really is what design should be all about. And with regard to your question about a good design and a bad design, well, if you can create a good costume, that doesn't, just because you can create a good costume doesn't necessarily mean that it's good design. So we might be looking at this very sparkly gown, this bejeweled, bedazzled, highly embroidered dress or gown or coat or anything. But we can say that it's good, it looks good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it contributes to the storytelling process. So that's basically the danger there of using, we in the Philippines, I know that we're so used to ay ganda, ay career, right? So these are the things that we love, as a part of expression. It's already in us, as Filipinos. But really, and part of what we were talking about earlier too is the stripping down and making sure that your design has truth in it. But to me also, if we're gonna look at good design, bad design, in terms of aesthetics and construction, of course your costumes needed to be built nicely, beautifully, with costumes being durable and all of that, and that's the craft really that we do. Especially costume builders, set builders, that's part of the craft that we have to really excel in. And so to me, we really have to be very careful about describing, good design, bad design. So you can think of these things in very separate ways or different ways, but those are my my thoughts on that question.
We would like to know your creative process, and can each of you talk about one memorable production? What was your role in it, and what was your creative process as a designer? Maybe you can just talk about the highlights of your process. So let's begin with Sir Raven.
The first big design gig or design project that you get is probably the most memorable. So I will say that. My most memorable would be my first big musical in the Philippines when we did Peter Pan at the Morocco Theater, just because it was I was, that was like exactly 10 years ago. And first big gig, first big project, and big musical and all of that. The most exciting part and experience for me in that show was that this is with Repertory Philippines and Stages together to produce the show. And what we did was we changed or altered the rehearsal space because they were rehearsing somewhere else. So the big office of Repertory in Ortigas, it has this extended room where they use as a rehearsal space. So we transformed the rehearsal space and turned it into our studio, basically our workplace. So that is where we embellished costumes, made costumes, so all of the interns were there. So to me, that was such a very nice experience because not only was I able to, design a big musical for the first time, right, in my career, but also enjoying the company of, the young students who are into production design and designing costumes. So I was already mentoring. I might probably not realize it at that time, but I was already sharing some knowledge with the students, and to me that was very memorable. And then probably, if I may add to another one, probably would be the last show that I was able to put up before the pandemic. The first and the last, at least before the world went shut down. And it's because there's a big difference now also of like how I treat design. And we were talking about like spectacles earlier as well. So obviously that whole big musical was a spectacle, but the most recent show that I designed really was all about like the stripped down modern adaptation of Pride and Prejudice by Kate Hamill. And so it was very, very different from my first experience designing. And it's all about building this world, creating the world that is very appropriate for this type of material. And what I enjoyed the most in this creative process was really identifying the definition of words. And to me, that where I am right now in my career also is I have started to learn collaborating with directors in a way that we just don't simply talk about design per se, like what is this character going to wear, what color is this character going to be, and blah blah blah. But we try to really sit down and talk about building the world, like what kind of world are we presenting to the audience members, and what is our version of this same material. And really identifying the adjectives, being able to define what these words are all about, because that will eventually lead you to that vision, right? So in our creative process, yes, we use the word collaborate a lot, but really listening to your directors and making sure that you're both on the same page, defining and describing these words and adjectives that will help you create the world that you want, that will eventually lead you to that vision.
The most memorable production was with the Romance of Magno Rubio when it was brought to the Philippines. That was with Loy Arsenas. My role there was just to translate the lighting design of James Vermeulen from the original New York production of Mai to the Tanghalang Huseng Batute. So Loy directed and did the set design and changed how the set looked based on the space, on the shape of the space. But James also sent his lighting designs based on what Loy did, made with all the changes. So I translated everything, did all the works, all the technical works that's needed. And then Loy sat down with me and said, okay, so what's going to be our first cue? And I said, you already have the first cue, and we have recorded it. And when I showed it to him, he said, nothing works. It's not going to work. So we spent almost 2 hours just building cue number 1. And this is the preset cue. Yep. And I was very patient. He was also very patient with me. That was the first time we worked together. And for me, that was memorable because I was trying to understand him. what is it that you really needed? We only have this number of fixtures, and what is it that you want me to do? I could not do anything else because I haven't sat in your rehearsals. I've only seen the play on video. I have read the script once, twice, and that was it. And I was just going to press the go button and on your cues. And it was like, no. We're going to build everything new. And yep, so that was most memorable because just to create one cue, almost 2 hours. So yeah, and it was very good. I mean, then I realized that, wow, this is really what you call collaborative to the truest sense of the word. Like, you just have to be patient with your director because what you're delivering is not okay with him. So the actors also keep on coming in and out of the stage, but nobody complained. And that was it was an eye opener to me. And so from then on, I said that if I could be this patient with Lloyd, and I could be patient as well with other directors, or probably also collaborate. Not that I just said yes to everything that he said. We had moments of arguments and say that, but this is not the way it should be. This is where, or maybe I should use a different fixtures because this is what you want. So I'm going to change everything. So we're going to stop rehearsals, and then I would change the fixture and focus again, and then show him. So that was the process. It was, as I've said, tedious, long for cue number 1, and we don't have so much time in the theater. But eventually, after that, when we already have you have your chemistry, then everything just flows, and it's been good. It's been smooth sailing for all the collaborations that we have done. My creative process. Of course, when you're given a play or when you're given a show to light, I will always have to read it, understand it, and then when I have this very bad feeling in my stomach, I get nauseated, then which means that I already have to do my work. I have to start working already, and that's when I will, after reading the first time, I would talk to the director and then ask the director what he or she wants to happen, and talk to the designers. And if nobody talks to me, I will always bug them. I'm the most clit person, and then ask, is this what you want? Is this what you want to happen? Why is it that nobody's talking to me? I need somebody to talk to me. And then I would again read the play at least twice, so I will understand, and then watch rehearsals, and then I will unlearn everything. After I watch rehearsals, I'm actually unlearning everything that I have read in the play, which is just sort of happened. I don't know. And then when I watch the rehearsals as we build the cues, that's when things just like falling into place. Okay, it's like deja vu. Like, oh, I think I know this. I think I know this is going to happen. I think this is where my cue is going to be. So that's how it is. There will always be arguments with directors, with designers, and even with technicians. There will always be that. And that's what makes the process very interesting and lively, because then there's something that people will talk about after. It's like, oh, they argued, they ganyan, no, chismis. So which is nice. And then they would be surprised the next day you're still in good terms. And that for me is very important, because that's where professionalism is. And part of that, because my work is very technical, and I think the same thing with design, is that you should always have all the paperwork that's needed, because you cannot be there all the time, even more so with lighting, because lighting changes sometimes changes with the current that you have, the electricity that you have. Sometimes you get burnout, and what do you do? So you have to make sure that you don't only collaborate with the creative people, but you collaborate with your technicians, with all the people on stage. You have to make them understand that your design is important as much as all the other designs, and they are important people to deliver your designs. So that those are just things that are important to me.
All right, thank you. I agree now that it's really our important job as designers to keep, a good chemistry and harmony with the artistic team and the technical team. So thank you for
Mhm.
that, Ma'am Barbie.
Yep,
All right,
thank you.
so lastly, Sir Clint.
I'm gonna try to keep this short. So my artistic process varies, right? But it's always it always starts with an emotional response to the play, and it is to me, I do this thing where uh, I try to get the play back to its emotional essence, right? And one of the things I love doing, even with like Shakespeare or whatever, is that I actually don't break down the play in sort of a linear schematic way. I kind of just write the lines of the play that stick with me. I just write it down and kind of, just write them one after the other, and you end up with this sort of like long poem, right? Like this epic poem. And I do that because I need to be completely solid with what the response is, the emotional response is. And when I make the play into this poem, right, like I've literally made it into a piece of music or something that's intangible, that actually I can elicit an emotion from, rather than being caught by the plot or the locations or anything like that, and that sort of drives me into research. I like getting lost in research. I go into like rabbit holes, of like research, and I give myself plenty of time to be in there, and then everything just happens differently. The thing that I think of today is going to be different. I try to actually design very late. I sit with the design. I try to push deadlines. I try to, because I'm not. It needs to sit with me for a long time, because I don't really actually know. I can't see it. I'm not one of those designers who actually sees it immediately. I don't see it. I'm not that person. But I think one of the most, I think of late, one of the most satisfying processes was the last show I did on Broadway, which was Slave Play, because it dealt with bigger systems, and it dealt with something that wasn't specifically my culture, but a culture that I inherit. And that fascinated me, and it fascinated me to no end, because I was collaborating with people who also inherited that culture, or were closer to the culture that we were dealing with. And so, and I like that. I think we as designers are very lucky, because we get to visit places that no other human being would actually visit, on any sort of like given season or, series of things that we do. We get to go places and meet people, and by that I mean like the plays and the characters that we meet that we wouldn't actually otherwise meet, just in our sort of, if we had normal lives, So yeah, that's sort of like my kind of process. It varies clearly with every show, but yeah, that's how I do it.
Thank you so much, Sir Clint. And now for our final question before we go to our audience's question. So, there are a lot of aspiring designers for the theater here in the Philippines, yet there are just a few schools that offer specialized program for theater design. And in fact, there are not a lot of scene shops, costume shops in the country where these aspiring designers can play around with their ideas, experiment on materials, and try and test their concepts outside professional theater. So, what practical advice would you give these young designers for them to acquire technical skills and develop a good eye for designing in the theater?
Yeah, like what I mentioned earlier, I think you should be really, you should feel very fortunate that you're in one of those institutions, that offer theater, be it performing or designing. So consider yourselves very lucky that you're in one of those. And I think that I think in terms of honing your skills and crafts, let's say for instance, costume design, um, and this is also something from my personal experience. If you're really somebody who wants to be highly technically skilled in construction, there's definitely a lot of schools there that offer tailoring classes, dressmaking classes, and all of that. It might just require some fees, of course, but there's so many things right now, especially with the Zoom era that we are living in right now. There's so many ways, there's so many opportunities, there's so many Facebook groups, that you can get involved in. There's so many, even Instagram, there's so many people that you can connect with. And I think that just because you go to UP doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay in your own circle. There communication nowadays, we're in 2021, you can always reach out to other institutions, other mutual friends perhaps, or friends of friends, and all of that. So don't limit yourselves. I think that that's one thing that I've also learned since I got here. The reaching out part to fellow artists is something that you have to start considering. So the same thing with people who go to Ateneo or UP or Benilde, try to reach out to your fellow artists, and I think that you will just from by doing that, you can get a lot of information and a lot of other opportunities as well. Throw yourself into any productive work and creative work that's out there in the Philippines, and who knows, there might be more coming in the future. With how we're all recovering from the pandemic, I think slowly a lot of the theaters will reopen eventually, but also opportunities for growth and learning more might also be in place in the future, and hopefully soon. I guess just keep yourselves creative and productive, and yeah, and we'll see how everything will turn out in the coming years.
All right. Thank you, Sir Raven. How about Ma'am Barbie?
I think there are two things, no? One would be is not be lazy. Very important that one will always have this craving for learning. Whatever books or magazines or comic books you can read or browse through, that would really help. You can browse through a lot now, as Raiden mentioned. You can browse a lot now in the internet. Everything is just there. Everything is just there. You just have to know what is not fake news, or what is real or not. Also, is that one should not be afraid. I mean, at this point, I'm still having my fears. There will always be fears. Fears that if I can do this, if I can do good with this production, if I'll make it work, or will this not work? All these things. But one should not fear. Fear to learn, to even spend hours and hours. You spend hours and hours doing your research, doing things that you think would say that, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be the designer. I'm not supposed to be dirtying my hands, or I'm not supposed to carry this or sew this or cut this. But it's the way to learn. And the only way to learn is that you immerse yourself in it. I think that most often than not, we Filipinos lack. We lack the courage to be in it. We always say, kayang-kaya, I can do that. Oh, yeah, I can always say that, kaya niya, di kaya ko. But how far will you go for it? I always tell my students, ask them, are you ready? Are you ready to fail? Are you ready to tell yourself that you did not do good? Or are you ready to always tell yourself that I'm always good? So those are just two things.
Thank you, Ma'am Barbie. And Sir Clint?
I don't really think that it should prevent you or anybody. Clearly, yes. I'm speaking from a point of privilege because I've trained. If you're really interested in it, and if you really have the spark. I would echo what Raven and Barbie said. Like, I think you should create your community. You should find your own tribe. You find the people who, listen, if I didn't have friends like Paul or Reyes or like the people that, we hung out with, like, all those wonderful theater people, like, who kind of buoyed me and also provided a community for me. I don't know if I would, I would actually have stuck it in the theater. The theater is not an easy, place. But I also am going to say that in terms of like schools or training programs and all of that kind of stuff, yes, maybe that's the quickest way to find that community, right? But I think I would actually love to see what would happen if we start thinking about, like, thinking of ourselves as having more agency than training programs, and thinking about, like, well, what can I do with what I have, right? And I understand that this is something that's really that could be controversial because a lot of folks actually don't have a lot in the Philippines, So, but I want to urge people to think about how even in the theater, you could deploy Philippine ingenuity, and I think that goes to the way we think, the way we know, how we can maximize the potential of very few things, right? And so I think for me it's really about that. It's not when I came to America, there were so many toys that I didn't know what to do with, right? And I still don't use all of them. I only use a few, you know what I mean? So I think part of what I'm saying is, like, having very little is not an excuse to create something magnificent. You know what I mean? To not create something magnificent, because you can. I trained in the street theater, with Chris and Peta and Kamalayan and all those, like, groups. And literally all we had were like malongs, and it would transform into these wonderful, like, amazing things, allegorical things that would move people, And so fall in love with that first, get addicted to that first, because I think that's always what you have to go back to once you start, like, thinking, oh gosh, I wish I was, doing this and doing that. It's like, I think that's the root of it. Like, that should be the underpinning, the backbone of everything that you do in the theater,
All right. Thank you so much, Sir Clint. That was very inspiring. So now, David.
So to conclude our roundtable discussion, we are going to read some of the questions from our audiences in Zoom. So first, we have here from Eman Mante. This is for Sir Clint. So he mentioned that he is also a Cebuano, by the way, and he's curious if there is any Cebuano material or story that you would like to pursue one day with your work.
This is very embarrassing because, like, you're really testing my Cebuano-ness. By the way, I'm not the only Cebuano designer, right? You know that Loy Arcenas is Cebuano. As a matter of fact, Loy's father was my father's doctor. I don't really know if there's anything specifically Cebuano, but I'm very interested in the specificity of the Cebuano experience. The last movie that the second to the last movie I did, Lingua Franca, was with Isabel Sandoval, who's also Cebuana, a Filipina trans woman. And I think she brought with her this kind of, we always talk about it, this, like, very unique, Cebuano experience. I'm more interested really about the current Filipino, right? The current sort of where the state of mind is of the Filipino. And so I'm always fascinated when I go home to Cebu because, like, I feel like I'm going to encounter people or characters from my past, right? But, like, I'm when I see my niece, my nephews, I encounter full human beings who actually don't resemble anything that I recognize, and I'm fascinated by that. Like, I think any sort of, like, Filipino story is always exciting.
Now, there's another question from Andre Fabricante here, and how can you tell if, I think we've already answered this a little, like, slightly a while ago, but what can you advise students who feel pressured to find their place in designing? Maybe these are the students who think, there are already a lot of good designers, and can I be one of them? So what would you tell these students?
There are so many places there. There are so many opportunities. One is you just have to make yourself available. That's one. You also have to create your portfolio. You have to create portfolios, and you have to, as Raven and Clint mentioned, you must have that. You mingle with people, theater people. You get to know more theater people. You cannot, word just spreads around. That's how it is. People, especially in the Philippines, they don't look into the directory or Facebook and say, now, who's the best designer? Who's a good designer? Who's that? No, they will not. A good word will always help you. And we have to it's also this Filipino mentality that we're always used to just hiring the same people and over again, because we feel that we're comfortable with them already. They know what we want. And that is also, as designers, we also have to change that. I don't want to work with this director because I always, fight with him. He does not understand what he wants me to do, what I want to do with this play. Or I don't want to work with this carpenter or this electrician because he's always making a mistake. So that's the thing that we also have to change, that mentality of working for the same people over and over again. We always have to try to mix people and give people the chance, and also take away this mentality, I think, of saying, okay, this is a low budget production, maybe we will just use this person. Because then this person will not demand anything except that we can demand from this person, but we will only pay this person this much. But if we will get whoever and we will pay this person this much, we'll make demands, then we don't have the budget for that. I think that is very cultural for us in our theater practice. So that.
Right.
Prepare your portfolio is very important. Yeah, your portfolio is very important, not just good in pictures, or good in video, but again, there's that truth in it, because people will always see the truth in you.
Exactly. So thanks, Ma'am Barbie. I think we are going to read last 3 questions so that we can wrap up already. Next is this is for the 3 of you. Maybe you can just answer very briefly, but this is from Jenny Bravo. When you were younger, or maybe until now, I mean, you are still young, everyone, but how do you respond to criticism?
You have to realize that you can never really please everybody. And I think that's the whole point of, bringing up all what defines a good costume or what, because it's in our nature, to please our directors, please the theater company. And that is why our designs need to look bongga, or they need to look polido, and all of that. So that's my first advice. Just do know and accept the fact that we will never be able to please everybody, but you can always present and even contribute to the production, because that's our main job, having something to contribute and bring to the table. So responding to criticism, yes, sometimes it hurts, when especially when the criticism really isn't constructive, or if it's really about about the product, that you have presented. It's not even you as the designer, it's the product. Anyway, it's very product oriented, the things that we do there. And I think that it somehow it serves as a reflection of your own self-assessment and self-evaluation as well. So if you keep receiving constructive criticisms or criticism in general, no matter what it may be, it's, to me, the way I take it is that I always take it as a moment of reflection and a moment of assessing myself, of where am I at this point, and how am I going to respond to this? So do not really always just settle on the emotional side of it whenever you hear criticism, but always use it as an opportunity to reflect and assess yourselves. So that's my quick response. Thank you.
Right. How about Sir Clint?
Yeah, no, I don't take well to criticism. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't usually respond, because it's very hard for me, because everything is very personal. Like everything comes from a personal place. So, sifting through, but yet I have to take criticism, right? And so I think one of the things that for me is like I really look at it as I have to pause and really think about I want to give that criticism the most generous interpretation I could possibly give, right? And then there's criticism that's also criticism is is criticism, so it's not a suggestion, it's not a mandate to change anything. It's literally an opinion of somebody's. And so for me, I have to sift through that. I have to see what's applicable and what's not. And then there are times when I have directors who insist on something, and there are times where I just have to tell myself, like, that director is probably seeing something that I possibly couldn't, because there are things that they are seeing that I probably, just because of my lived experience, probably is not even within the realm of consciousness, so yeah, that's my answer to that.
Right, thanks. How about Ma'am Barbie?
Kung ayaw niya, di siya na lang ang mag-ilaw, di ba?
Agreed.
Just kidding. Ano yun which brings me back to the first thing that Clint said, that he is after realizing that he doesn't want to be a director, he wants to be more of the person at the back, where he can just go back to his room. And then I would say that yes, problema ng director yung critics na yun. Mm-hmm. But because when I do my design, when I collaborate with the director, it will always be working towards the vision of the director of the production. Now, I myself would be my worst critic. If I can, I will tell myself that no, this is not good. I would tell the director, so I will say that I think I need to redo this because it's not good. And when the director tells me that I think this needs to be redone because you need to add more cues or remove this and that so that it will look okay. And then you'd say, okay, but sometimes there would be arguments. And then when the director says, okay, it looks good, then that for me is the best critic already. Or it doesn't look good, then that would still be best critic, because then you still get to improve on it. But yes, after the process, that's all I'm gonna say to them. Do it yourself. Yeah. And then
exactly.
And just do it, and then let me see what you can do. Because I mean, critics will always say what they see, what is right about it. So they don't understand. If they don't talk to you about it, then it's their loss. Maybe also as an artist or as a creative person, you will lose that opportunity to explain yourself. But in the end, there's really nothing, for me, there's really nothing to explain. I may feel sad about it, that people don't like it, or this particular critic doesn't like it, but you just have to brush it aside. And then if your director and you've lit your actors well, your working relationship is good, your process has been good, then I think that's more worth it than paying attention to this whoever that critic is. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ma'am Barbie.
Oh,
okay, so
you.
Next question, maybe Sir Raven can answer this, and this is a question from Carlo. So what is an artistic license for you, and how do you apply an artistic license to your design, especially in a period production?
Tatakan mo.
Yung pinakamahirap ng tanong, ha? Last question, pinakamahirap. Well, I talking about period production or period accuracy is such a, I'm sure at some point a lot of you perhaps have watched Bridgerton and all of these like period pieces on Netflix. But you have to make sure that all of your choices are always supported. Okay, that's why we have been talking about the process since the beginning of this conversation, because I think that the only time that you can actually claim or nail down and own that artistic license is if that's completely supported by your research and your process in general, with your collaborative process with your director. And I think that it's not just like something, oh, I want to tweak it to make it look different, I want to tweak it to make it, look a certain way. But I think that the only time that you can actually own your artistic license is as if it's supported by research and a meaningful and fruitful process along the way. So that's my take on that, because nowadays we really tend to tweak a lot of things, and like, where's artistic license in that? So for as long as you're meeting the vision, for as long as you're fulfilling the vision and you're contributing to the vision, then that's the only time you can take artistic license and own it.
All right, thank you so much, Sir Raven. Okay, so for our next question from Geraldine Corpus, what do you think about the future of technical theater and design since we are in the pandemic and online platforms such as Zoom are utilized?
I think this is the time that we have to embrace it. In 2019, I did a talk in the Singapore Broadcast Asia. My talk was about from the stage to the screens. And little did we know, in 2020, it all happened with the pandemic, which is ironic because the Philippines, we were never ready for it. But I think since we are very, very fast learners, we have learned to embrace it. We have learned to embrace the technology that, there are other mediums that we can use, media for that matter, like TV and the internet that we can use. I think the future, this whole thing will still continue. This doing work online, and there have been a lot of groups that have been doing video productions of their dance, of their plays that were not noticed before, but now becoming to be known. And this will also change. This will also change how we document our productions. Now we're going to aim for what the Met Opera has been doing, or the Royal or the National Theatre in London's been doing, documenting it with high-powered cameras and very good TV direction, where the audience will not miss so much as they are live watching the show in the theater. So I think this will still go on, and I don't think this will ever stop us from creating. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, for lastly, Sir Clint, do you have any take on this?
No, I think we're forced to innovate. I also don't think that it's I think we're it's not done. I know that the practice has changed because of the pandemic. I think we're learning new things, and we're actually learning new things about how we perceive watching plays, or I think there is one of the good things about the pandemic is that it's proven to us that there is really the walls between media, theater, television, film, all of that is like they're very porous, and so yeah, I'm excited about what it could look like.
Thanks. Those were wonderful sharings, and of course we are all inspired. So JLo?
Yeah, indeed, that was a powerful discussion, and as designers, excited kami to do better, and I'm pretty sure that our audiences were also inspired and have learned a lot from our panelists. So looking forward to having more sessions like this one.
We would like to show our gratitude to the team behind the Mata at 40 project, led and convened by Assistant Professor Brian Elviray, our Mata Program Coordinator and Advisor, Ms. Maria Loren Rivera, our Project Manager, and to the Subcommittee for Mata ARTisTalk 2021, composed of Eman Mante, Coordinator, and members Gada Samparo and Jonas Gabriel Garcia.
Now let us proceed with the presentation of certificates. So first, the Certificate of Recognition is hereby given to Barbara Tan-Tiongco for sharing her expertise in the ARTisTalk 2021 as part of the celebration of the 40th founding year of the Master of Arts in Theater Arts program, given this 22nd of May 2021, signed by Professor Maria Amihan Bonifacio Ramolete, PhD, Dean of College of Arts and Letters, Professor Belen D. Kalingacion, PhD, Chair of Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts, and Assistant Professor Brian L. Viray, MA in Theater Arts Coordinator and Advisor, and Mata at 40 Project Leader.
Thank you. This is very good. Very good. Yeah.
Thank you, Ma'am Barbie. Now, this certificate of recognition is hereby given to Raven Ong for sharing his expertise in the ARTisTalk 2021 as part of the celebration of the 40th founding year of the Master of Arts in Theater Arts program. Given this 29th of May 2021, signed by Professor Maria Amihan Bonifacio Ramolete, PhD, Dean, College of Arts and Letters, Professor Belen D. Kalingacion, PhD, Chair, Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts, and Assistant Professor Brian L. Viray, MA in Theater Arts Coordinator / Advisor, and Mata at 40 Project Leader. Thank you, Sir Raven.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Lastly, this certificate of recognition is hereby given to Clint Ramos for sharing his expertise in the ARTisTalk 2021 as part of the celebration of the 40th founding year of the Master of Arts in Theater Arts program. Given this 29th of May 2021, signed by Professor Maria Amihan Bonifacio Ramolete, PhD, Dean of College of Arts and Letters, Professor Belen D. Kalingacion, PhD, Chair of Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts, and Assistant Professor Brian L. Viray, MA in Theater Arts Coordinator and Advisor, and Mata at 40 Project Leader.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And to everyone who participated today, thank you for sharing your experiences on theater design. Hopefully, our viewers out there were inspired and encouraged by what you have imparted.
Once again, thank you for letting us be part of another episode of the ARTisTalk series. I am David Esguerra.
And I am J-Lo Conanan. Maraming salamat po.
So this has been the ARTisTalk series final episode on learning and teaching theater design. We thank you for tuning in for the past 4 episodes that we have streamed on this page, and if you wish to revisit the past episodes, scroll down on this page or click the links attached on this video. Like this page and follow us on Instagram at UP Diliman Mata to stay updated on the latest activities that are to follow for this year's celebration of the 40th founding year of the UP Diliman MA in Theater Arts program.